Imagine a little girl. She's only 4 years old. She's scared, she's crying, and she is in a little village high up in the mountains of Kurdistan in Iraq. She's screaming, she's shouting, but nobody's hearing her voice. She's desperately holding on to her mother's dress. Her mother's bleeding. Half of her face is missing. And the sound of gunshots, it's still echoing in the little girl's ears. These images, these sounds, the deep feeling of fear will be forever frozen in my memory. I'm sure that all of you feel a great deal of sympathy for this little girl. You might even think of your own son, daughter, nieces and nephews. But at the same time, you might feel a sense of helplessness. What can I do? This happened in a country far away from here. I'm here today to tell you that you have the key to help this little girl and thousands of little girls and boys just like her. I know that because I was this little girl who suffered from trauma and fear throughout her childhood. But she was lucky to get through it because of the help of people like you. I also know that because I have been working tirelessly for the past 12 years as a psychologist to find out how I can relieve traumatized refugees from their trauma and from their fear, and to help them to have a productive and happy life. When my mother got shot, I learned that no matter how much I shouted, how much I screamed, I didn't have a voice as a child. And I learned that the world was not safe. My story begins the same way as the story of millions of refugee children all over the world. It begins with a war. My name is Mozhdeh. It means good news. Yes. I was given that name by my Kurdish parents because they were certain that my name came with the good news of peace and democracy for the Kurdish people. And because I was born the exact same day that the revolution ended in Iran in 1979. But they were wrong. Only 6 months after my birth, I ended up in prison with my mother. And after that, 13 years refugees in Iraq. As refugees, we didn't have any rights. We experienced oppression, cruelty, and death. I will spare you the details, but I can tell you that they were experiences that nobody should be exposed to, not a child or an adult. I learned the same thing that many refugee children end up learning at some point in their life, and that is my family and I were unwanted by the people around us. We were simply unwanted. I also learned that the people that I loved and the people that I cared about, they just disappeared. I remember my little brother crying and shouting and being really angry every time my dad would leave the house. Because he knew the exact same thing that we all knew, that every time we said goodbye to somebody, there was a huge risk that we will never see them again. I knew the same. So I would hold on to my little brother's hand firmly, and I will pull him close to me, hoping that I would never lose him. Like millions of refugee children, I grew up never knowing what it meant to feel safe. Fear consumed all of my being. I was afraid every second of my life. Today we know that constant fear has psychological damaging effect on children. Almost 40 to 50% of traumatized refugees end up developing post-traumatic stress disorder. For many years after my mother got shot, I could not sleep. I had nightmares all the time. I could not learn anything because I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't remember. I would faint if I saw blood. I would faint if I saw somebody angry or if I saw a soldier. My immune system was damaged by stress, so I would get infections all the time. Yet, I consider myself lucky. My family was lucky because we were able to get out of the war zone. Thanks to the UN system of quota refugees, and thanks to Denmark for accepting us. But my struggles as refugees did not end then. Even after I came to Denmark, I realized that my trauma and my fear did not disappear. While I wasn't in a war zone anymore, and the bombs had stopped falling, and the bullet had stopped raining over me every day and night, I was still afraid. During the night, I would be back in the war, fighting for my life in my nightmares. In the days, smells and sounds would take me back to the war. Again and again. You probably remember my little brother that I told you about, that could not say goodbye and got really angry every time my dad left the house. He's grown up now. He lives close to me. He's actually sitting in the audience today. But still, he's unable to say goodbye. Every time he visits me, it takes him 30 minutes to say goodbye and get out of the house. And when he gets to his car, finally, he calls me right away to tell me that he will see me again soon. And he calls me again when he's home. He calls me again right before he goes to sleep. My story is not unique, unfortunately. You probably heard of the million of refugees all over the world today. According to United Nations, there is more than 65 million refugees right now today. This is equivalent to the big country like UK or France. These numbers are overwhelming. They're difficult to relate to. I know. They are for me too. Even though it seems impossible to do anything about these millions, just affecting the life of one person for the better is of great significance. And every and each of these numbers represent a human fate, like myself, my brother, and the refugees that I work with. So the challenge is, how do we ensure that refugees, many of which are traumatized, can have a good, productive life for their own benefits, but also for the benefit of the society and the economy as a whole? In my work as a psychologist, I have found out that even though it is essential working on processing the traumatic experience, it's not enough in itself. Because the refugees I work with, every time they experience a huge amount of stress or transition, their trauma reaction will come back. So I start asking them one simple question. What is the difference between the times that you're feeling well and the times that you're not? And their answers were always the same. Fear. Especially the children would tell me that they felt afraid everywhere and every second of their lives. And the only place they wanted to be was with their families, because that was the only place they felt safe. And the importance of safety is also backed by academic research. The theory and the research of Professor Jennifer Bowman tell us and show us that we're born with a core assumption that we're safe in the world. That gives us the ability to go out and live freely. And when that ability is shattered because of a traumatic experience, we're no longer able to trust people around us. We're no longer able to trust ourselves. So if traumatized refugees need to heal, or we help them to heal, they need to trust again. And in order to trust, they need to feel safe again. And the process of regaining safety, the feeling of safety, is not achieved only through psychological therapy. It is achieved through being with other people in communities where you feel safe. And that is also shown by a study done by Edith Montgomery, who followed 450 children, refugee children, arriving as asylum seekers in Denmark. The study shows that almost 90% of the children, when they arrived in Denmark, they had trauma reactions. But the children who got asylum and who were moved to a very safe community shortly after, their trauma reaction actually disappeared. They recovered. So safety and community matters. Today, I have learned that as a psychologist, if I want to help traumatized refugees heal and also have a productive life and be integrated in their societies, I need the help of the communities around them. And the question is that a difficult thing to do? To get that help? To give that help? And the answer is no. It's actually very simple. Every and each one of you can change life. I'll give you some illustrations. When I came to Denmark, and what gave my family and I hope back, and the feeling that we were normal human beings like everybody else, was the kindness of one man. That man's name is Valdemar. He was 70 years old at the time. We were living in a small village, and in all the years that we lived there, none of our neighbors ever knocked on our door to ask us how we're doing or to say hello. And one day, Valdemar just showed up. He talked and talked in Danish. We didn't understand anything of what he said. Still, we welcomed him, and we sat down, we drank tea. Valdemar started watching the Kurdish news with my father. And then he decided that he would like to teach us Danish. And we started having something to look forward to every day. Valdemar made us feel welcome. He made us feel normal. And most of all, he made us feel safe. When I was working in London a few years ago with torture survivors, I met this young adult. His name is Jonas. And Jonas, at the time, he didn't have asylum. He was living on the streets. He was suffering from depression, suicide thoughts, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And one day, I went for a walk with Jonas, and every time we met a friendly person who would smile to him, he would stop up and he would ask if you could take a picture with them. the same way as he took a picture with me after every session we had. So one day I asked him, why is he taking so many pictures of everybody? And the answer was very simple. He looked at me, he smiled and said, well, it's really scary at the dark in the evenings when I'm lying in the streets. That's the time where I have suicide thoughts and I don't want to be here anymore. I get scared. When that happened, I simply take out my phone and I look at all the friendly faces that I have seen that day. And I remind myself that the world is not that bad. Maybe it's not that scary. And I start looking forward to tomorrow. What Valdemar and Jonas taught me is very simple, but at the same time, very powerful. He taught me that it's me and you who got the power to give back refugees what has been shattered within them. It's us together who can give back these people the feeling of safety. And it's very simple. Every kindness actually counts. You just have to treat them as you treat any other human beings. Be kind, be curious, talk to them, smile. When I was 16, I fled Iraq with my family in the back of a truck. I remember looking out and thinking of thousands of refugee children I have left behind. And I remember at that moment making myself a promise that one day I will find my voice. One day I will be able to tell the stories of a refugee child. I will be the last voice of the children of the war. And today I stand in front of you, no longer frozen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Today I stand in front of you. While my trauma is still part of me, I'm no longer frozen. I'm no longer overwhelmed by fear. At the same time, I know I'm standing here because I was given a chance that millions of refugee children is not given today. I was given asylum, and I was met by people who was kind and gave me back the faith in humanity. Being a refugee is not a choice, but welcoming them and being kind to them is a choice that every one of us can make every day. I remember my mother always telling us that refugees look for angels in their journey. And these angels would change our life by their simple gesture of kindness. And we make a place in our heart for these angels and remember them for always. And my wish today is for all of you that you will go out and be an angel for the next refugee that you meet. My wish today is that you actually will go out and be someone's Valdemar. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.